They told the council, over and over again. The warnings came first from scout drones, automated things with no emotion, just hard-coded logic and war-worn sensors. What they captured from that blue marble in Sector 9 Beta was unlike anything recorded before. Cities burning, skies torn by steel birds, creatures made of meat and bone that fought with such hatred they'd torch their own world to win. The drones transmitted the data, labeled it extreme hostility, do not engage, observe only. The council laughed. Primitive animals, spat Minister Couture, lounging on his throne of bone glass. They eat their own kind. We have tamed galaxies. They are insects. It wasn't long before the scouts stopped transmitting. That should have been the first clue. But arrogance runs deep in the skin of empires. So they sent an observation fleet. 12 cruisers, not warships, observation vessels, scientists, translators, xenologists. They landed cloaked near a desert zone, far from the civilized parts of the planet. Quiet, careful, surgical, they never returned. One transmission made it through. Grainy, cut with static. Screams, gunfire, laughter, human laughter. One of the researchers, something like a biolinguist, managed to get a single sentence translated before she was torn apart. Do not attack the humans. They will hunt you forever. Still, the council didn't listen. They thought it was fear talking, panic, weakness, so they did what proud empires do when they feel insulted. They sent a fleet. A real one this time, 3 battlecruisers, thousands of troops, a standard show of dominance. It wasn't even a declaration of war, it was a correction. The humans didn't treat it like a war either, they treated it like a massacre. Fleet Commander Haskin was a war veteran, 53 campaigns, burned half a dozen civilizations to ash. He arrived with weapons charged and a speech prepared, something about surrender and mercy. He barely made it into orbit. The first ship was torn in half by a weapon no one could identify. It wasn't plasma, or kinetic, or ion. It was just destruction. A silent erasure. 1 second there, the next. Gone. The humans hadn't built fleets. They hadn't launched warning beacons. They'd dug in. Every inch of their world had been turned into a trap. From satellites hidden behind space junk to railguns disguised as debris to strange, localized anomalies. Gravity behaving like it was drunk, time skipping like a scratched audio track. Humanity didn't build a line of defense. They turned their planet into a goddamn snare. Only one ship escaped. Barely. Half its hull shredded, crew irradiated, command systems hijacked by some AI that mocked them in a child's voice before purging their memory banks. The council finally listened. And now they are afraid. Not of invasion. Humans didn't leave Earth. They didn't need to. They just waited. Because when the stars turned quiet again, when the fleet stopped coming, when the skies were empty, the hunts began. Not wars, hunts. Outposts started disappearing, one by one, then trade convoys, then mining colonies. Gone, not destroyed, just missing, vanished, silent. No wreckage, no signals, just nothing. Rumors bled through the silence like poison. They wear our skin to get past security. They breathe fire now. They don't need ships. They move in shadow, in thought. A captured merchant screamed until his lungs collapsed, claiming he saw one standing on the bridge of his freighter, just standing there in vacuum, watching, smiling. And then, always, the whisper. Do not attack the humans. They will hunt you forever. The council is now splintered. Ministers accuse each other of hiding information, of stoking the fire. Some say humanity is extinct, and this is all psychological warfare. Others believe the humans found something ancient buried under their planet and became something else. But no one can deny the fact. Humans never declared war. They were attacked. And now, they're just returning the favor. The planet Ulvan 6 had been silent for 12 rotations. What made it strange was that it had been the busiest mining colony in that region. 40,000 personnel, automated refineries, military-grade satellite coverage. The Council used it as a resource hub to fuel the outer campaigns, rich in fission ores and volatile energy compounds. Then, without warning, it went dark. No alarms, no distress calls, just silence. The usual response in the old days would have been a small scout team. Cautious, scan the area, analyze radiation, maybe check for local rebellions or reactor failure. But not anymore. Not after the incident. Not after the humans started showing up in the dark. Instead, the Council sent the 3rd Legion, 6 destroyers, full weapons live, 2 planetary bombardment vessels in orbit, and a containment protocol on standby, just in case the silence turned into something worse. Commanding them was High General Varric, known across systems as the Hound of Drenvar, famous for breaking sieges and torching rebels with a reputation so cold it could freeze magma. He wasn't afraid of humans. Not yet. They landed hard, guns ready, dropped mechs deployed instantly, a perimeter established within minutes. They weren't there to ask questions. Just sweep, secure, and sterilize anything out of place. But Ulvan 6 didn't greet them with gunfire. No. It welcomed them with stillness. Varric stepped out of his transport and scanned the horizon. Red sand, char-black mountains, a dust storm forming near the horizon. But there was something else. Something off. "Where are the lights?" he muttered. Mining colonies never turned them off, even during sleep cycles. The ambient glow of industry usually bathed the surface in a dull pulse. Machines never slept. Production never stopped. But here? Pitch black. No hum of generators, no machinery clanking, just silence. He moved toward the central hub, flanked by his elite guard. The entrance doors stood wide open, as if waiting. Inside, the lights flickered, weak emergency backups casting shadows that moved like they were alive. "Thermals," he ordered. They all toggled their visors. Nothing. No heat signatures. Not even residual warmth. "Did they freeze to death?" one soldier whispered. Varric stepped into the main atrium and stopped. There, in the middle of the room, hung a banner. Not a digital one. Not the Council's logo. A physical cloth, torn from something crude and stitched by hand. Black fabric, red paint, a single phrase. "You hunted us. Now we hunt back." Varric's grip tightened around his plasma rifle. A chill ran down his spine, something he hadn't felt in decades. The deeper they moved into the compound, the clearer the message became. No blood, no bodies, no wreckage. But signs of panic were everywhere. Chairs overturned, datapads scattered mid-recording, food half-eaten. Whatever happened here, it was fast, sudden. Too fast for 40,000 trained personnel to respond. As they reached the central command tower, one of the soldiers found something on the glass, etched in with some kind of laser. A human skull. Not real. Just a drawing. Stylized. Crude. But unmistakable. Underneath it, "You should have listened to your own scouts." Then the power cut out. Every light, every HUD, every weapon interface. Darkness swallowed them. Someone screamed. Gunfire erupted in every direction, wild and panicked. Varric shouted for calm, but even his voice got drowned by static as the comms jammed. Something moved through the dark. Not machines, not shadows. Silhouettes. Brief flashes of something walking, no, gliding between them. No footsteps, no thermal readings. But the men felt them. Cold, watching presences just out of reach like wolves encircling prey. One by one, the soldiers started disappearing. No screams, no fights, just silence, followed by missing life signs. By the time the emergency lighting kicked back in 5 minutes later, only 17 soldiers remained, out of 200, and no sign of the enemy, no blood, no bodies, just gone. Above the planet, the Council's orbital command vessels watched the data stream degrade. Video feeds flickered, signals cut off. Finally, all systems flatlined. Protocol dictated that if contact was lost and hostile takeover suspected, orbital sterilization would follow. General Varric should have ordered it himself. He didn't, because they never heard from him again. Before they could process the next step, something hit one of the orbital ships. Not a missile, not a beam, just a small metal object, barely the size of a cargo pod. But it tore through the warship like it was made of paper. It passed clean through from one side to the other, leaving a massive exit wound and a trail of molten, screaming steel. The crew inside didn't even have time to react. The surviving ships started powering up shields, but it was already too late. The stars around them lit up. Not from planetary fire, not from ships emerging from jump, but from debris. Human ships. If you could call them that. Rusted, ugly, asymmetrical, made from scavenged parts, old colonial hulls, outdated fusion cores, but repurposed, brutalized, modified for one thing only: destruction. These weren't fleets. They were monsters made of metal. The orbital fleet tried to retreat, but jump drives failed. Localized gravity distortions warped space around the planet. Something was jamming physics itself. That's when the humans started broadcasting. One word, over and over again. Run! No formal declaration, no demands, just that single command, as if they weren't offering mercy, but just taunting. Back in Council space, paranoia turned into full-scale panic. The humans were doing what no species had ever dared. They were winning, not through numbers, not through technology, but through psychological annihilation. They didn't hit military targets first. They didn't cripple supply chains. They went for symbols, shrines, capital ships named after heroes, planets with historical significance, not to destroy them, but to make examples out of them. One planet found all its citizens intact, untouched, except blindfolded, their hands tied, and a human phrase carved into every wall. You wanted war. We studied it. That was the terrifying part. Humans didn't fight back like prey. They researched, learned, adapted. They took every war tactic used against them and twisted it into something crueler, something inhuman. Rumors spread that they didn't sleep anymore, that they'd altered their DNA to remove empathy, that they could smell fear in non-carbon species and track it across parsecs. Most of it sounded like lunatic nonsense. Until those same rumors started showing up in battlefield reports. Even the most disciplined Council soldiers started to break. Some refused to deploy. Others committed suicide when assigned to human-targeted missions. Captains abandoned posts. Entire fleets mutinied. And still, humanity said nothing. No diplomats, no peace talks, no negotiations. Only silence, followed by vengeance. In the deepest vaults of the Council, old scholars unearthed ancient logs, Earth's history. A record once ignored, now read with trembling hands. They learned about wars that wiped millions, weapons that defied logic, nations that built entire industries around destruction. Humans hadn't survived through peace. They had evolved through conflict. They were forged in fire, betrayal, desperation. Their history wasn't a warning. It was a promise. When the Council realized what they'd provoked, it was already too late. This wasn't a retaliation campaign. It was a crusade, an ideology, a belief system burned into every human soldier. They wanted monsters, so we became them. By the end of the year cycle, 10 more Council colonies vanished. Entire sectors blacked out. Some said they'd seen human ships formed entirely of black stone, moving without engines. Others reported a new weapon, something like a virus made of light that infected technology and turned it against itself. But all reports ended the same way. A final message. Short, chilling. Do not attack the humans. They will hunt you forever. There was one place left the humans had never touched. Tervana Prime, the so-called Crown of the Council. It was the shining capital of the Galactic Authority. A place so protected, so entrenched in defense systems and legacy infrastructure that most believed it to be untouchable. Orbital rings lined with plasma arrays, AI-controlled defense satellites, fleets on standby across 5 jump corridors, and a planetary defense field strong enough to survive direct hits from Sun-class weaponry. It wasn't just a planet. It was a statement. If Earth was a forgotten dirt ball in the spiral arm, Tervana was the jewel carved into the throne of the universe. That's why the Council felt safe. That's why they gathered there. And that's why, when the first sign of breach came, no one believed it, not even when the sky turned black. It started with static in the planetary communications grid. Then came the magnetic fluctuations, minor but strange. Every few hours, lights would dim. Power would flicker. The air felt heavier. At first, engineers blamed solar storms or deep space anomalies, but the Council's science ministry couldn't find a cause. Not in nature, not in the data. Then someone found the source of the interference, the moon, or what was left of it. Their moons were being carved out from the inside, hollowed, infected with some kind of alien scaffolding. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't biological, it was human. A hybrid tech the Council didn't recognize, half-coded, half-grown. They called it the Dark Root. By the time they dispatched fleets to investigate, it was too late. The moons didn't explode. They opened. Petal-like structures unfurled from within them, unfolding slowly. Sickly black metal stretching across space like a blooming corpse flower. Each petal housed weapons no one had seen before. Silent, humming, cold. They didn't fire beams. They didn't launch missiles. They emitted signals, low frequency, vibrations that shook Tervana Prime's atmosphere to its core. And then, everything went quiet. Not just the comms, not just the defense grid. Everything, every ship in orbit shut down, every drone, every satellite, every goddamn bullet and power cell on the planet below. Total silence. Inside the council chambers, panic spread like fire. Ministers screamed. Security guards drew weapons that no longer worked. Generals shouted into dead headsets. They couldn't comprehend it. This wasn't war. This wasn't even invasion. This was domination. No warning. No speeches. No demands. Only silence. Then, as if some ancient god had answered the screams of the helpless, something fell from the sky. Not a ship. Not a pod. Just a cage. A long metal coffin black as night. Slammed into the center of the Capitol Square with enough force to crack the marble foundation. It hissed as it opened. The creature inside didn't crawl out. It walked. 2 legs, no armor, no helmet, human, or at least, it used to be. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, veins glowing faint blue under the surface. Its eyes were black pits, depthless and burning. Tattoos marked its arms, symbols in old Terran languages, war terms, names, death tolls. This wasn't a diplomat. This wasn't a soldier. This was a message-wearing flesh. He walked calmly through the chaos. No weapons, no shield, and not a single soul tried to stop him. Because in that moment, every being on Tervana Prime realized the same thing. He didn't need weapons. He was the weapon. Inside the central archives, a young technocrat named Rain had barricaded himself behind security doors. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't brave. He was just someone who read too much. He had studied the humans after the first colony attacks. He didn't believe the propaganda, the simplified reports that painted them as savages or primitives. He saw the truth. He saw the history no one wanted to acknowledge. A race that learned how to kill long before they learned how to fly. A species that turned fear into science, grief into invention, and suffering into religion. He'd read about the last global war on Earth, the mass extinctions, the self-inflicted catastrophes. He read about Hiroshima, the Holocaust, Rwanda, the corporate water wars, the rise and fall of ideologies, the violent rebirth of nations. He knew what the Council didn't. That humanity was never meant to survive. They had survived anyway, by becoming something else. The man in the square raised his hands, not in surrender but in demonstration, and across the city people began to die. No bullet, no blast, just a sound, barely audible, subsonic. But it crawled into their skulls like ice. Some bled from their eyes, others began to seize, some just dropped, face first, never getting back up. It was targeted, selective. Only the ruling class, the military, the ones responsible, civilians, servants, janitors, vendors, were untouched. The message was clear. We know who you are. We know what you did. The man finally spoke. No translator needed. Just 5 words. His voice didn't echo. It whispered through stone. This is for the children. And then he burned. He didn't self-destruct. He ignited. His body turned into flame without fuel, a blue fire, quiet and cold, that consumed everything near him, but didn't spread. It devoured only what it was meant to. When it was over, the city square was scorched to the bone. Every statue gone, every symbol melted. Only the message remained, burned into the stone in a language no alien race ever dared to speak until now. We are the price of your arrogance. The Council shattered that day. Not politically, spiritually. There were survivors. But they weren't leaders anymore. They were witnesses. They spoke of humans not as enemies, but as gods of vengeance. Entire systems declared neutrality. Some surrendered preemptively, begging for mercy. Others just abandoned their posts and vanished into deep space, hoping to be forgotten. But humans weren't just retaliating anymore. They were cleansing. A calculated purge of anyone who sanctioned the first attack. Every general, every minister, every corporate figure, every war profiteer. They were hunted, one by one. Some tried to hide on fringe planets under assumed names. Didn't matter. The humans found them, and they didn't always kill them. Sometimes they just watched, sent signals, left symbols, drove them to madness, paranoia, suicide, and the message never changed. Do not attack the humans. They will hunt you forever. Back on the edge of the dead zone, once called Earth, humanity gathered in silence. They didn't cheer. They didn't chant. They remembered. They remembered the billions turned to ash when the Council's fleets first came. The children lost. The cities erased. The screams. And they remembered how the universe laughed at their pain. How they were called savages. How no one believed them. How even their warnings were mocked. So they changed. They gave up names. They gave up borders. They gave up identity. They became one thing, vengeance, not for justice, not for power, just to make sure no one ever forgets again. Before the war, Earth was already dying. Not from warheads or invasions, from rot, corruption, exploitation, pollution, greed. Humanity had reached its technological peak, but spiritually, socially, morally, it had flatlined. Billionaires played gods, empires feasted on the poor, and digital chains held more weight than steel. Then came the First Fleet, the Council's glorious intervention. They told themselves it was to contain a threat, but everyone knew it was about resources. Earth had what they wanted, exotic matter under its crust, hydrogen-rich oceans, and a species too divided to defend itself. So they attacked, not with warnings, not with negotiation, with fire. Satellites were blinded in minutes, spaceports obliterated, entire cities were leveled from orbit. The Council called it a clean strike. Collateral damage was acceptable. They killed 3 billion in a single day. And that should have been the end. It wasn't. In the ashes of that apocalypse, something ancient stirred beneath the Earth's crust. It wasn't a weapon, not yet. It was a project. Hidden beneath the Andes Mountains, deep under an abandoned research complex known only as Obsidian Core, humanity's final gamble had been buried decades before the invasion. It was called Project Threshold. No one in the Council ever found out who started it. Some said it was a rogue AI that had gone silent after predicting planetary extinction. Others claimed it was the work of a cabal of geneticists, physicists, and sociopaths with nothing to lose. What is known, years later, is this. Threshold wasn't about survival. It was about transcendence. Inside Obsidian Core, there were 10,000 volunteers. Not soldiers, not politicians. Just people who'd lost everything. Families burned alive in the opening strikes, homes turned to glass, lives turned to ash. They walked into the dark willingly. They were told one thing. You will not come back human. They agreed. The process was ugly, inhuman. It broke minds, bodies, identities. Threshold used tech the world had outlawed, DNA splicing, consciousness folding, neural rewriting. A new form of biosynthetic interface that let the human body evolve alongside machinery. Not just wearing armor, but becoming it. No more nerves, no more limits. Pain became code. Emotion became a weapon. They didn't create super soldiers. They created hunters. And the first one to survive the full sequence? Codename. Ash. No surname, no past, only pain. Ash wasn't strong in the way soldiers were. His muscles weren't big. His eyes weren't sharp. But inside his skull? A neural lattice grown with reactive synthetic myelin that processed threat data faster than any quantum AI the Council had ever dreamed of. He moved like smoke. He fought like mathematics. He didn't kill out of rage. He calculated pain, tested it, refined it, then delivered it where it would hurt the most. The first time Ash deployed was on a recon mission. A small Council logistics station on Titan, completely unaware Earth was even still alive. He entered the facility without setting off a single alarm. 97 personnel. None survived. There were no gunshots, no firefights, just absence. The last recorded footage showed a Council technician walking down a hallway, then pausing, blinking, staring into the camera like he'd just heard something behind his eyes. Then he started sobbing, bleeding, and collapsed. That was Ash's signature, neuro-invasive field disruption. He didn't have to touch you to kill you. He just had to be near. As the Council prepared new waves of expansion, they started to notice their edges shrinking. Not through attack, through infection. Infrastructure breaking down. Entire bases turning on their own. AI becoming unstable. Ships refusing to obey basic commands. They blamed viruses, tech faults. But Earth had figured something out. A way to embed consciousness into electromagnetic fields. The hunters weren't bound to their bodies anymore. They could live in waves, piggyback off transmissions, hide in ambient frequencies, listen to your thoughts through the neural implants Council officers so proudly wore. Every time the Council used their tech, they invited the ghosts of humanity into their systems, and the ghosts were angry. Ash wasn't alone for long. Threshold grew fast. The process refined itself. Pain was the forge. Trauma was the fuel. Each volunteer brought something unique, a memory so sharp It became a weapon. There was Kira, who survived the orbital strike on Johannesburg by pulling her children's bodies out of the rubble and carrying them 5 miles with her spine broken. Her neural field produced gravitational anomalies under emotional duress. Dane, a construction worker who witnessed the execution of his entire union when they refused to help rebuild council structures. His fists could compress carbon steel into powder. Lorne, a deaf medic who developed echolocation so advanced he could hear your heartbeat through a kilometer of concrete. Each hunter wasn't just a soldier. They were a story made flesh, a living grievance. And they didn't forget. The council, for all its might, never adapted. They still believed in strength through numbers, strategy through statistics, command through hierarchy. But the hunters didn't obey. They didn't broadcast. They didn't coordinate by signal. They moved like wolves, silent, reactive, bound by instinct and shared suffering. One council general once said, before his fortress was breached, "It's like fighting a nightmare that remembers you." Because the hunters didn't just kill, they made examples. They burned your face into the walls of your command center. They broadcast your last breath back to your homeworld. They carved your crimes into your bones. Justice? No. Memory. Earth never took back the stars. They didn't need to. They let fear do it for them. Hundreds of worlds went dark on their own, abandoning posts, crashing satellites, wiping AI cores, burning libraries of war plans just in case a hunter might see it. The council tried to cover it up, tried to spin the narrative, but they couldn't hide what was happening. When children on other planets started having nightmares of Earth, despite never being told about the war, when AI began drawing human faces with no prompt, when entire species began developing an instinctual fear of darkness, they realized something terrifying. The hunters had moved past biology. They were in the collective unconscious. Stories, fears, nightmares. Humanity didn't need ships anymore. They traveled through myth. And Earth? It remained silent. No broadcasts, no ambassadors. Just a dying planet turned holy ground. A place no one dared approach. Because they knew. Buried under the ash and ice, deep in the bones of the Earth. Project Threshold was still running, and there were more coming. More broken souls, more pain, more wrath, more hunters. The final council bastion, located on a moon carved into a war citadel, tried one last time to retaliate. They sent a full fleet, 60 warships, 6 million troops, AI-driven command centers. The response? One hunter. Ash. He didn't arrive in a ship. He just appeared. No one knows how. Some said he walked from the edge of space. Some said he burst from the dreams of the council commander. Either way, the fortress never reported again. Scouts found only wreckage. And in the heart of the command room, carved into the main console, a message. "We warned you. You hunted us first. Now we will never stop." The council didn't fall with a scream. It fell with a whisper. Long before the hunters reached the inner sanctums, before Earth even struck the homeworlds directly, the council's empire was already rotting from within, and that was exactly what the humans wanted. They didn't need to fire on capital ships. They didn't need to drop bombs on cities. They just needed to wait, because fear, real, bone-deep, sleepless, paralyzing fear, is a weapon no army can fight. And the council gave it to themselves. The paranoia started in the outposts. A captain goes missing. No sign of struggle, no trace of a body. His logs show erratic behavior the week before, talking to himself, waking up screaming. One day he looks into a security feed and says, "They're in the lights," before taking his own life with a plasma cutter. The report is buried. Then it happens again, and again. Different planets. Same pattern. Commanders going mad. officers sabotaging their own ships, security teams turning on each other. Eventually, entire squadrons stop responding. When emergency crews are dispatched, all they find is a message scorched into steel. "We are your guilt made flesh." In the Council's inner chambers, unity begins to fracture. The technarchs, those who control the flow of information and digital infrastructure, start demanding emergency powers. They claim they can stop the human data infestation, a mythical invisible force said to be corrupting the entire empire. The War Masters, the old guard military caste, believe it's psychological. They demand martial law, purging of suspected infected citizens, and the deployment of shock teams to suspected human-influenced sectors. The Gene Clerics, meanwhile, whisper of something worse. They've been monitoring strange changes in the behavior of newborns across dozens of species. A rise in instinctive fear responses to shadow, to cold, to human-like vocal tones. They fear the humans have unlocked something ancient, a biological frequency, a neurosymbolic virus that travels not through code or light, but through stories. "Every child who dreams of Earth," one cleric says, "is a battlefield we've already lost." They are laughed out of the chamber. 3 days later, half the chamber is dead. No bombs, no bullets, suicides. Some swallowed poison, others walked into fire. One minister stabbed himself in the neck on a live broadcast, repeating the words, they know what we did. They remember everything." The broadcast was shut down, but not before 20 billion beings saw it. And suddenly, everyone remembered. What they remembered was the truth. That Earth had warned them. That humanity had begged not for mercy, but for time. Time to recover. Time to adapt. Time to survive. That the Council had voted to attack anyway, not out of necessity but out of convenience, because humans were weak, scattered, exploitable, because they were ugly, loud, rebellious, uncontrollable, because they were afraid of what humans might become if left alone. So they struck first. And now, that guilt had grown teeth. Entire systems began to rebel, not against humanity, but against the Council itself. Planets once loyal to the Galactic Order began cutting off communications, declaring neutrality. Some openly invited human visitation, not out of alliance, but out of raw terror. They believed that if they admitted the truth, maybe they would be spared. The Council called them traitors. But they didn't send warships, because their warships had stopped listening. Out in the Persid Fringe, Admiral Torvin of the 5th Stellar Fleet received a direct order to bomb a colony suspected of human influence. He refused, not because he sympathized with humans, but because the last time one of his admirals followed that order, she disappeared. Her ship found adrift 2 weeks later, crew gone, every inch of its interior coated in a substance that looked like ash and whispered when touched. Torvin made a choice. He turned his fleet around. Then he broadcasted a message to every channel, every band, every frequency. It said, "The Council has lied. They started this war, and now they ask us to finish it, against the only species that warned us what would happen." The message went viral, not just because of what he said, but because, standing beside him, visible in the background, was a human, unarmed, unmoving, watching. That's when the Council realized the hunters weren't killing everyone. They were letting certain people live. Commanders, journalists, pilots, technicians, ones with conscience, ones who spoke the truth, ones who could spread the infection of doubt. Because humanity understood something the Council never did. Words are sharper than war. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the sky stayed dark. No broadcasts, no threats, no announcements of victory, just that quiet, ever-present silence. The surface remained mostly uninhabited, covered in ash and ice. But underneath, the obsidian core continued to hum. Project Threshold had grown beyond control. There were now entire cities underground, built not with concrete and steel, but with memory and rage. Constructed through neural architecture, solidified emotion shaped into corridors and chambers through the minds of those who could no longer be called human. Every room in Obsidian Core told a story. Every hallway echoed a name. Every wall was marked with, "We remember what was done." Inside one of the deepest levels, Ash stood in front of a new arrival. A young man, no older than 20, skin still raw from the conversion process. His hands shook. His body was strong, but his mind was cracking. He wasn't ready. Ash said nothing at first. Then, softly, in a voice that hadn't been used in years, "They'll try to break you. They'll call you monster. They'll ask you for mercy when they never gave it to us." He paused, then leaned closer. "Do not give it to them. Give them memory. Let them choke on it." The young man nodded, tears running down his scarred face. Back in council space, the last high seat, Supreme Chancellor Urin, was preparing to evacuate to a hidden system. She still believed she could negotiate. She had drafted a message to humanity. It read, "We acknowledge our crimes. We seek a truce. We wish to discuss reparations and peace." Before she could send it, her security team turned on her. They weren't hunters. They were her own people, because they knew something she didn't. Peace was never the goal, not anymore. Not after the ash, not after the fire, not after the screams. Humanity didn't want a truce. They wanted memory carved into the bones of the galaxy, forever. The Galactic Council dissolved officially on Cycle 9481.412. No war, no treaty, just silence. Every system it controlled fractured into chaos, factions, rogue states, exiles. The central database, once the most powerful network in the known galaxy, was deleted by a hunter-born AI that left only one file behind: a black screen, a white skull, and 5 words: "Do not attack the humans." And then, "They will hunt you forever." The day the Galactic Council officially collapsed, no celebrations followed. There were no victory chants, no declarations of freedom, no new flags raised in glory. Because everyone knew the truth. This wasn't a liberation. It was a sentence, a warning carved into the bones of every system, not by speeches but by absence, by the way entire cities vanished, by the stillness that followed whispers of human names. By the way, hunter symbols began to appear, not just on council ruins, but on walls, doors, weapons, even dreams. And the worst part? No one knew how they were still spreading. 2 years after the fall, the galaxy entered the Quiet Age. Trade broke down. Colonies stopped sending messages. Outposts refused to respond to distress calls, not because they were dead, but because they were afraid to be seen. If a world lit up its beacons, it might attract attention. And if it attracted attention, it might attract them. On the planet Caldris 9, once a thriving agricultural colony, fields lay untouched beneath sky-glass domes. The remaining population, about 20,000, had moved underground. They had no radio, no AI, no ships. They lived like ghosts, all because of a single event. 7 months after the council fell, a child on Caldris 9 began speaking in Terran dialect, Old Earth English. No one had ever taught her. Her ancestors had never even seen Earth. She didn't know what the words meant, but she spoke them anyway. At night, in her sleep, whispers, names, Ash, Kira, Lorne, Dane. Then one day she stopped speaking, and in her place she wrote something on the wall of her sleeping quarters, not with paint or chalk, but with her own fingernails. "We are the shadow under your bones. We are memory made hunger. We are what you made us. The elders of the colony sealed the room. They stopped all data transfer. They went dark, and no one has heard from them since. Elsewhere, in the ruins of the former council capital, something new began to grow. Not a government, a faith. They called themselves the Remnants, not survivors of the war, but worshippers of the punishment. They believed the humans weren't just a species. They were a divine consequence. Their doctrine was simple. The first sin was arrogance. The second sin was mercy. The final lesson is silence. They didn't build temples. They preserved ruins, left council buildings untouched, scorched, half-collapsed. They refused to repair or rebuild. Instead, they engraved the names of the dead onto the wreckage, not to mourn them, but to remember why they died. The remnants didn't pray for salvation. They prayed that the humans never returned. But deep down, they knew it didn't matter. Because the humans had never left. On the shattered moon of Virex, a team of deep miners unearthed something that had no right to be there. It was buried under 3 kilometers of ice and stone. A human skull, preserved perfectly, not fossilized, not decayed, just waiting. The miners reported it immediately, within hours. Their station lost power. Within a day, all transmission ceased. A week later, a salvage crew found the place deserted. No signs of violence, no blood, just tools left mid-cut, food half-eaten, terminals frozen mid-word. And on the wall near the skull, etched in rust. He sees through the stone now. The crew sealed the mine and fled. No one's been back since. Not everyone feared the humans. Some wanted to be like them. That's how the cult of Threshold began. It started small. Black market forums, encrypted transmissions, rogue scientists who believed the hunters were not monsters, but evolution. They began experimenting, illegally. Unregulated AI interface implants, synthetic emotion modulators, pain threshold conditioning programs. Their goal was simple: to create the next generation of hunters. But they lacked what Project Threshold had. They lacked purpose. Their volunteers didn't come from ash and grief. They came from ambition, ego, madness. The first batch of ascendants lasted 6 months. The second batch, 3 weeks. The third batch, 2 hours. They died screaming, every one of them. Not because of the process, but because, according to recovered logs, they were being watched, even in sealed labs, underground, in sterile, vacuum-tight conditions. They all reported the same final hallucination: a tall figure, silent, unblinking, wreathed in smoke, just watching. It wasn't long before people stopped trying to mimic the hunters, because they began to realize something chilling. The hunters hadn't just survived the war. They hadn't just won. They were still changing. Some systems began reporting a new phenomenon. Dead sectors, places completely devoid of light. Not black holes, not energy drains, just total, complete darkness. Ships that entered these sectors didn't crash. They didn't explode. They just stopped being. And in the few surviving logs retrieved from unmanned probes, there was always the same final image. A shadow standing in the void. No eyes, no form, just presence, and always, always, the words etched into the final frame. You attacked us once. You thought we'd forget. Across the galaxy, ancient species began to rewrite their histories, erasing records of their involvement with the Council, destroying evidence of their votes for war. Some even destroyed their own archives, burning away centuries of knowledge just to remove any trace of their role in humanity's suffering. They thought if they erased the past, the hunters wouldn't come, but it didn't matter, because the hunters remembered everything. Some tried to fight back. A new coalition of ex-council warlords and mercenary fleets gathered in the rim. They called themselves the Last Flame. They wanted to strike Earth directly, end the nightmare at its source. They built a fleet, over 100 ships, hired the best minds, the best weapons, cloaking, disruption tech, anti-neural fields, everything that had failed before, just improved. They jumped into Sol, and they made it all the way to Earth's orbit, but they didn't attack, because Earth wasn't there anymore. The planet was gone, not destroyed, not shattered, just gone. Nothing but a void, no gravity, no debris, no heat signature. Like someone had folded it out of reality. Their logs showed only one final anomaly. A faint echo. Repeating, over and over, a child's voice, singing, in English. Ring around the Earth we go, ashes, ashes, all fall down. Then static, then silence, then nothing. The Last Flame was never heard from again. The galaxy stopped trying after that. No more war plans, no more coalitions, just silence and survival. Each world now fends for itself, afraid to speak too loud, to shine too bright, to remember too openly. Because if there's one lesson they've learned, if there's one truth carved into the galaxies like scars, it's this. Humanity never stopped hunting. They don't need ships anymore. They don't need planets. They exist in the fear you pass to your children, the dreams your AI won't analyze, the cold you feel when the power flickers. They are the price of arrogance. They are the revenge of the forgotten. They are the story whispered when all the lights go out. Ash hadn't been seen in nearly a decade. Not by the dying fleets, not by the failing colonies, not even by the hunters that still whispered his name in neural frequencies and bone-etched symbols. But his presence lingered, in places where systems died overnight, in voids where light refused to exist, in dreams of ex-soldiers who'd never even fought humans, yet woke up screaming his name. Some said he was gone. Others said he had ascended, become something more than body, more than machine. But there was one truth whispered across the dying systems like wind through graveyards. Ash wasn't finished. The last remaining hunter enclave, located deep beneath the molten crust of Nairo 6, was a ruin. A tomb carved into stone by minds that no longer used hands. The place wasn't built, it was remembered into being. The walls pulsed faintly with the thoughts of those who had lived there, echoes of rage, grief, purpose. Only 3 hunters remained. They didn't speak. They didn't move unless called. They were old, not in age, but in weight. They carried centuries of memory etched into every fiber of their altered flesh. They didn't wear armor. They were armor. Their names were long forgotten, but the remnants had given them titles. The Mirror, a hunter whose body absorbed any weapon fired at it and returned it with interest. The Silence, a blind one who moved by sensing regret in the hearts of enemies. And the last, the Torchbearer, the one who carried Ash's name in his chest, branded into his ribcage, over a heart that no longer beat but still burned. It was the Torchbearer who kept the one secret even other hunters feared to hold, the location of the memory core. No one alive truly knew what the memory core was. There were stories. Some said it was a data vault buried in the crust of a rogue planet, where the minds of the original Project Threshold volunteers were stored like files in a cold server. Others said it was older, something pre-war, something even the Council had found once, and buried again. But everyone agreed on one thing. The core remembered everything. Every name, every death, every scream, every council vote to strike first, every child who suffocated under rubble while alien warships passed overhead. It was Earth's final record. But more than that, it was a weapon. not of mass destruction, of truth. Some believed Ash had gone to the core to die. Others said he went there to sleep, but those who followed the trail, those foolish or desperate enough to try, found only madness waiting for them. The scavenger ship Nightcall was the last known vessel to trace the signal. It was crewed by deserters from dead fleets, hackers turned salvagers, and one ex-remnant priest named Sarek. They didn't go to destroy the core. They went to see it, to understand it. Maybe even to learn how to stop the hunters. They followed the last known neural bleed, fragments of a hunter's dying thought, across 11 systems until it pointed to a drifting planet in uncharted space. Blackrock Theta, no sun, no moons, just cold silence. And deep below its surface, something pulsing. Nightcall landed. They descended into a series of caverns that didn't make sense, passages that looped on themselves, stairways that climbed downward, walls that whispered when touched. Time slowed. Or maybe the ship's clocks broke. Maybe their minds did. One by one, the crew vanished. Not violently, they just walked into the dark. Except Sarek. He kept going, and he found it. The memory core. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't a vault. It was a chamber of light, floating symbols, human language encoded into geometry, rotating strands of data that moved like thought. And in the center, waiting for him, Ash. He hadn't aged. He hadn't changed. He simply was. Standing in silence, eyes closed, like a statue of war built by grief itself. Sarek fell to his knees. He wasn't a fighter. He didn't hate the humans. He had just wanted to understand. And Ash opened his eyes. What Sarek saw wasn't rage. It wasn't even pain. It was something far worse. Clarity. Ash didn't speak out loud. The words were inside Sarek's skull. Soft. Unavoidable. We didn't become monsters because of what you did. We became monsters because you showed us how. You taught us to strip a planet for its blood. You taught us to measure worth by silence. You taught us that peace is weakness and mercy is fiction. You lit the fire. We just refused to put it out. Then Ash stepped aside and let Sarek see the core for what it truly was. It wasn't just a record of war. It was a mirror, a perfect simulation of every life lost during the first attack, every thought, every last breath, billions of human consciousness frozen in their final moment. Every time someone accessed the core, they relived it, not as an observer, but as the victim. Sarek screamed, and the core kept showing him. Children holding hands beneath collapsing schools, nurses pinned under rubble, still trying to help others, old men holding photographs as fire rained down. Ash watched him, and when Sarek collapsed, bleeding from the nose, trembling, broken, Ash said one last thing. We didn't want revenge. We wanted you to remember, but you made forgetting too easy. When Nightcall's emergency beacon activated 6 months later, a salvage team found Sarek alone. No crew, no logs, no memory of how he got back aboard. But he had carved something into his own chest with a broken blade. Earth remembers, and his eyes no longer blinked. The galaxy tried to move on, tried to rebuild. But it couldn't, because every time a new alliance formed, a hunter would appear, sometimes in flesh, sometimes in thought, sometimes only as a shadow in the corner of a dream. And always with the same message: you do not get to forget us. There are no more wars now, just silence and watchers. The hunters do not rule, they do not conquer, they do not forgive, they remember, and in remembering, they ensure the galaxy never forgets again. 1,000 years had passed since Earth vanished, 1,000 years since the Council fell, 1,000 years since the last official warship flew toward Sol and returned silent. And in that time, the galaxy had changed. Not rebuilt, not healed, just adapted. The major species now ruled themselves in isolation, afraid to unify, afraid to signal too loudly, afraid to rise too high. Interstellar trade was a whisper. Communications were localized. AI was outlawed. Exploration suspended, because no one wanted to attract the shadows again. No one wanted to hear the old names. Not Ash, not the Hunters, not Earth. But forgetting is a disease, and the galaxy was sick. It started quietly, as rot always does. A new generation was born into the silence, raised on fear but not memory. They never saw Earth, never fought in the war, never buried their families beneath the black rain of orbital fire. All they knew were the ruins of the past, stories told in hushed tones, written in banned books, and whispered by the dying. They began to ask dangerous questions. Were humans really that powerful? Did the Hunters even exist? Maybe the Council was right to strike first. Maybe Earth deserved it. In some corners, laughter returned, then mockery, then revision. And in one system, Veris Namon, a university released a published thesis titled The Humanity Hoax, Manufactured Terror and the Collapse of Rational Empire. Within a month, it was downloaded across 1,000 colonies. Within a year, it became gospel in the outer sectors. Then, inevitably, a new empire rose. They called themselves the Accord. They promised progress, order, peace. But what they truly promised was amnesia. They rebuilt the archives, removed the memory walls, erased all references to the war, every mention of Earth, deleted, every image of the core, scrubbed. And when that wasn't enough, they started hunting the survivors of those who still believed. The remnants were declared extremists, their shrines burned, their books banned, their warnings mocked. Even the phrase, "Do not attack the humans," was labeled a superstition, a ghost story. They said humanity never transcended. They said hunters were fabricated, part of post-war trauma responses and mass hysteria. They said Earth was a myth, just another star, gone cold. And for a brief moment, the galaxy felt brave again. Then came the signal. It arrived across all systems at once, simultaneous, perfectly synchronized, immune to time lag or distance. A single image, a child's drawing, crude, shaky lines, stick figures, a blue planet, a ship above it, a fire falling, and beneath it, words written in shaky, childlike Terran script. "You forgot us." Panic spread like plasma fire. Ships shut down. Colonies sealed themselves. The Accord declared it a psychological attack, blamed rogue code remnants from AI wars centuries ago. But the people knew. They knew what followed the whispers, what came after the signals, what always came after forgetting. The Accord sent a fleet to investigate. They followed the signal's echo. It led them to Sol. And what they found there was not nothing. Not anymore. Earth was back, not in orbit, not cloaked. It had returned, or maybe it had always been there, floating in the cold, silent, but different. There were no satellites, no stations, no signs of life, just the planet, whole, untouched, pristine, like the war never happened. The fleet sent drones, scans, landing teams, everything reported normal. No radiation, no biological hazards, just trees, oceans, clouds, but no humans, no cities, no life, just a perfect, silent Earth. One officer touched down in the ruins of what used to be New York. He walked among green towers wrapped in vines, through glassless windows and rusted cars buried under grass. He found a house. He opened a door. Inside, on a table covered in dust, sat a single device. A cube, black and pulsing faintly. He touched it, and the core opened. He saw everything: the war, the screams, the votes, the council's justification, the sterilization of children, the orbital burns, the laughter. He saw Earth's pain. He felt it, every second of it. Then he saw what came after: the first threshold hunter. Ash, the campaigns, the silence, the decision. What the core truly was. Not just a memory chamber, but a sentence, a judgment written by the dead, carried by the broken, delivered by the last who survived. He fell to his knees, weeping, and begged for death. It didn't come, because the core wasn't here to kill him. It was here to remind him, just as it had done 1,000 times before. The fleet returned, damaged, silent, not physically. Their ships were intact, but their minds? Broken. Each crew member either mute or repeating fragments of Earth's history over and over again, names, numbers, moments. And at the center of each of their palms? A mark? Not a burn, not a cut, just a symbol. The human skull, drawn in silence, branded not on flesh, but on consciousness. The Accord tried to hide it, tried to spin it, but the message had already spread. The core had opened itself. Earth was no longer hiding, because Earth didn't need to. The point had been made. The memory had been buried long enough. Now it would be law. Across the galaxy, the core awakened in fragments, no longer centralized. Every time someone denied the war, a vision came. Every time a child laughed at the myth, a nightmare followed. Every time a world tried to rise on the bones of the past, the ash returned. The hunters? They were gone. No longer flesh, no longer needed. They had fulfilled their duty. The galaxy no longer needed fear. It needed truth. The truth of what arrogance brings. The truth of what forgetting costs. The truth of what it means to burn a species and expect peace to follow. In the end, Earth didn't conquer the stars. It didn't erase the empires. It didn't build a new galactic order. It reminded the universe of something far more powerful. The dead do not forget. The broken do not forgive. And the hunted eventually become the hunters. In time, a new phrase replaced the old warnings, written in every child's book, etched into every ship's hull, branded into the minds of every leader and soldier. Earth is watching, and beneath that, always, do not attack the humans. They will hunt you forever.